No, I didn't record all that. All right, chapter 2. Give my regards to Clark Poindexter. Larry Dunn was the king of the kindergarten to 4th grade, where I went to school at Clark Elementary. He was king because he was a lot older than anyone else and twice as strong as the rest of us. He was stronger because he was almost full grown, and he'd flunked some grade time 2 or 3 times. He was the 3rd oldest kid at Clark. The only ones older than him and stronger than him were Byron and Butthead, who were in the 6th grade, and who'd also flunked some grade at least once. We weren't sure because it was something that Mom and Dad just really didn't talk about. Larry Dunn was king of the kindergarten to 4th grade, only because Byron didn't care about them. Larry was the king of Clark, and Byron was a god. It seemed like that would make me a prince or a real strong angel or something, but it didn't work that way. I was just another 4th grade punk. I guess having the school's god as my brother didn't give me some kind of special rights, but not a whole bunch. It helped me with stupid stuff like the time I found a dollar bill and got too excited and was crazy enough to show it to Larry Dunn. I knew this was a big mistake about a second before he stuck his hand out and said, "Let me see it." What could I do? "Kenny," he said, "where'd you find this buck?" The buck is talking about the what? Dollar. So sometimes that might be a word, like B-U-C-K could be known as a buck as a deer or as a buck as a dollar. Right?
It's the context.
Right. That's right. The context is what tells you what it is. Outside the school, over by Kenilworth, Larry turned my dollar over and over, and I started getting nervous. You know what, Kenny? What? I held my breath. That is some real strange stuff. But I had lost 50 cents over on Kenilworth yesterday, and I bet my 50 cents got hooked up with someone else's 50 cents and made this here buck. Whew. I let my breath go and smiled and nodded. We went to the store to get change, and Larry Dunn got back to the 50 cents he lost, and I got to keep the other 50. That got hooked up with Larry. I knew if it wasn't for Byron being my big brother, Larry wouldn't have said something like, "Since my 50 cents found this other 50 cents, and they hooked up to make this here buck, I'm going to keep the whole thing." You know the rules. Finders keepers, losers weepers. Can a 50-cent piece or 2 quarters hook up with 2 other quarters to make a dollar bill?
Mm-hmm.
No, it can't.
Well, it does make a dollar, but it's not going to make a dollar bill, right?
Because it's not green.
So he didn't lose 50 cents. He was doing what?
Trickery.
He was tricking him, but because he was a bully, he was going to win and keep that money. Having the school god as my relative helped in some other ways too. I had 2 things wrong with me that would have gotten me beat up or teased a lot, more than I did if it hadn't been for Bob. So Bar is Byron. They should call him Bar for short. The first thing was, because I loved to read, people thought I was real smart. Teachers especially. Teachers started treating me different from other kids when I was in the 1st grade. At first, I thought it was cool for them to think I was smart. But then I found out it made me enemies with some of the other kids. Back when I was in the 2nd grade, Miss Henry used to take me to different classrooms and have me read stuff out of the Bible or the newspaper in front of the other kids. That was a lot of fun until I started looking up from what I was reading and noticed that while Miss Henry and the other teachers were smiling a mile a minute, all the other kids had their faces twisted up and were looking at me like I was a 6-legged dog. 2 years ago, Miss Henry took me to Mr. Allum's 5th grade class. Mr. Allums was the toughest teacher in the school, and just being in front of him was kind of scary. He looked down at me and said, "Good morning, Mr. Watson. I hope you are in good form today." I just nodded at him because I wasn't sure what that meant. What does he mean by "I hope you're in good form today"? What does that mean? Addie. In good shape. What were you going to say, Addie?
Like, I hope you're ready.
Hope you're ready. Hope you're having a good day. Don't be nervous, Kenny, Miss Henry said. Mr. Owens would like you to read a few pages from Langston Hughes. She handed me a book and said, "You wait here while we introduce you to the class." Man, some of the time, I wish I was as smart as these teachers thought I was. Because if I had been, I would have dropped that book and run all the way home. I had been smart enough to figure out what was going to happen. Next, I would have never gone into that room. I stood in the hall looking at the stuff they wanted me to read while Mr. Owens told his class, "All right, I have a special treat for you today. I've often told you that as blacks, the world is many times a hostile place for us." I saw Mr. Owens walking back and forth, whacking a yardstick in his hand. I pointed out time and time again how vital it is that one be able to read well. I've stressed on numerous occasions the importance of being familiar and comfortable with literature. Today, Miss Henry and I would like to give you a demonstration of your own possibilities in this regard. I want you to carefully note how advanced the second grade student is. And I particularly want you to be aware of the effects his skills have upon you. I want you to be aware that some of our kids read at miraculous levels. So obviously this book is written in the 1950s, 60s, back when things weren't segregated and we had black schools, white schools, things. So this is a realistic fiction with some history in it. So a realistic, historical fiction is what I should say.
On a picture, he's not no kid no more.
Right. All right. So perhaps you'd like to finish. He said, "I saw Mr. Alums point the yardstick at someone somewhere in the class and say, 'Perhaps you'd like to finish the introduction. I think you know you're our guest quite well.' Whoever he pointed at said, 'What? I didn't do nothing.' Miss Henry waved for me to come in and stand in front of the class. I guess I was too nervous about Mr. Alums to have recognized the voice before. But as soon as I walked into the room, I froze. There in the two seats closest to the teacher's desk in the very first row was Buckhead and Byron. The Langston Hughes book jumped from my hand and the whole class laughed. Everyone but Byron. His eyes locked on mine and I felt things were melting inside of me. Mr. Alum slammed the yardstick on his desk and the class got real quiet. Let me see if you find this so humorous after you've heard how well this young man can read. And Byron Watson, if you are incapable of taking some of that fire out of your eyes, I assure you I will find a way to assist you. If instead of trying to intimidate your young brother, you would emulate him and use a mind of yours, perhaps you'd find things much easier. Perhaps you wouldn't be masking around, or you wouldn't be making another appearance in the 5th grade next year. Now, would you?" Byron got one more dirty look in at me, then looked down at his desk. Mr. Owens might as well have tied me up to a pole and said, "Ready, aim, fire." I read through the Langston Hughes stuff real quick, but that was a mistake. Miss Henry said, "Slow down some, Kenneth." And then she took the book from me and handed it back upside down. She had a great big smile when she told Mr. Owens, "When he goes too fast, this slows him down a bit. Miles, we should try this with you."
Find the book upside
I read some more with the book upside down and got some real strange look from those fifth graders. Finally, they let me quit. Mr. Owens stood up and clapped his hands, and a couple of the old kids did too. Byron never looked at me the whole time, but Buphead was giving me enough dirty looks for the both of them. Bravo! Outstanding, Mr. Watson. Your future is unlimited. Bravo! All I could do was to try to figure out how to get home alive. I didn't even get out of the school's yard before Byron and Buphead called up to me. A little crowd bunched up around us, and everyone was real excited because they knew I was about to get jacked up. Buphead said, "Here's that little egghead punk is." "Leave the little clown alone," Byron said. "It's a crying shame taking him around like a circus freak." He punched me kind of soft in the arm and said, "At least you ought to make them pay you for doing that. If it was me, they'd be coming out of their pockets with some folding money every time they took me around." I couldn't believe it. I think Byron was proud of me. When everybody saw Byron wasn't going to do anything to me for being smart, they all decided that they better not do anything either. I still got called egghead or Poindexter or professor some of the time, but that wasn't bad compared to what could have happened. The other thing that people would have teased me a lot more about if it hadn't been for Byron was my eye. Mama said it wasn't important, that I was a real handsome little boy. But ever since I'd been born, one of my eyeballs had been kind of lazy. That means instead of looking where I tell it to look, it wants to rest in the corner of my eye next to my nose. I'd done a lot of things to make it better, but none of them worked. I'd done exercise when I had to look that way, then this way, that way, up and down and up. But when I went to look at the mirror, the eye still went back to its corner. I'd worn a patch on my other eye to try to make the lazy eye work, but that didn't do anything either. It was fun to play like I was a pirate for a while, but that got boring. So does anyone know about the lazy eye? That's when one of the eyes kind of wanders. Like,
Could you see
I know a couple of people that have a lazy eye.
Could you still see out of it?
You can still see out of it. You just have like this eye, because I had shingles in it, it's a little bit lazy. Yesterday, the person that I was at their house working on my national boards, they had a cat that had a lazy eye. I've never seen that. That was interesting. Finally, Byron gave me some good advice. He noticed that when I talked to people, I squinched my lazy eye kind of shut, and that I put my hand on my face to answer it. I only did this because it got hard to talk to someone when they were staring at your eye instead of listening to what you had to say. So he would talk to people with his face like that. Like I would say, "Layla, how are you feeling today?" Look that way instead of look straight on. That's what he did. "Look, man," he told me, "if you don't want people to look at your messed up eye, you just got to do this." Byron made me stand still, look straight ahead. Then he stood on my side and told me to look at him. I turned my head to look. "Nah, man, keep your head straight and look at me sideways." I did. "See? You ain't cockeyed no more. Your eyes are straight as an arrow now." I went to the bathroom, stood on the toilet, and leaned over to look in the mirror sideways. And Byron was right, too. I was kind of handsome little guy when I looked at myself sideways and both eyes were pointing in the same direction. Even though my oldest brother was Clark Elementary School's guide, that didn't mean I never got teased or beat up at all. I still had to fight a lot and still got called cockeye Kenny. And I still had people stare at my eye. And I still had to watch when they made their eyes go cross things when they were teasing me. It seemed like one of those things happened to me every day. But if it hadn't been for Byron, I knew that it had happened a lot more. That's why I was kind of nervous about what was going to happen if Byron ever got out of 6th grade and went to junior high before I called up to him. That's why I was going to send off for the book, Learn Karate in 3 weeks. That was the book of my comic books. That was in the back of my comic books. The worst part about being teased was riding the school bus on those mornings when Byron and Buckhead decided that they were going to skip school. We'd be standing on the corner waiting for the bus, Byron, Buckhead, and all the other kids, thugs in one bunch. Larry Dunn, Banky, and all the other young thugs in another bunch. The regular kids, like Joetta, in a third bunch, and me off to the side by myself. When we saw the bus about 3 blocks away, we all got in a line. Old thugs, young thugs, regular kids, then me. It wasn't until the bus stopped and the door opened that I knew where Bi and Buckhead were going. I hated it when Bi walked past and said, "Give my regards to Clark Poindexter." Some of the time, those words were a little signal for the other kids to jump on me. But the day I stopped hating the bus so much began with those little words. We were all lined up. "Give any regards to Clark Poindexter" by then, and disappeared around the bus back. I got on the bus and took the seat right behind the driver. And the days by road, I would be sitting a few seats behind him on the back. On whatever days the driver was the most protection. On those days, the driver was the most protection. The bus drove down into public housing, and after everyone was picked up, we headed towards Clark. But today, the bus did something he'd never done before. He noticed 2 kids running up late and stopped to let them get on. Every other time someone was late, he'd just laugh at them and tell them and the rest of us, "This is the only way you little punks is going to learn to be punctual. I hope the fool has a pleasant walk to school." What does punctual mean?
Be on time.
Being on time. So that could be a word you could write down. Then, no matter how hard the late kid banged on the side of the bus, the driver would just take off laughing out of the weather. That was part of my miracle. Let me know something special was going to happen. As soon as the doors of the bus swung open and these 2 strange new boys got on, part 2 of my miracle happened. Every once in a while, Mama would make me go to Sunday school with Joey. Even though it was just a bunch of singing and coloring books and learning about getting saved, I knew how someone could learn to come to you when you were feeling real bad and could take all your problems away and make you feel better. I learned that the person who saved you, your personal savior, was sent by God to protect you and to help you out. When the bigger one of the 2 boys who got in the seat of the bus lane to the driver in a real down south accent, "Thank you for stopping, sir." I knew right away. I knew that God had finally gotten sick of me being teased and picked on all the time. As I looked at this new boy with the greater big smile and the jacket with holes in the sleeves and the raggedy tennis shoes and the tore up blue jeans, I knew who he was. Maybe he didn't live a million years ago, and maybe he didn't have a beard or long hair, and maybe he wasn't born under a star, but I knew anyway. I knew God had finally sent me some help. I knew God had finally sent me my personal savior. As soon as that boy thanked the driver in the real polite and country way, I jerked around in my seat to see what the other kids were going to do to him. Whenever someone new started coming to Clark, most of the kids took some time to get to see what he was like. The boys would see if he was tough or weak, if he was cool or square, and the girls would look to see if he was cute or ugly. Then they decided how to treat him. I knew they weren't going to waste any time with the new guy. It was going to be real easy and real quick with him. He was like nobody we'd ever seen before. He was raggedy, he was country, he was skinny, and he was smiling at everybody a mile a minute. The boy with him must be his little brother. He looked like a shrunk-up version of the big one. Everyone had stopped what they were doing and were real quiet. Some were standing up to get a better look. The older ones got an even better smile on his face and stared real hard at everybody. The little shrunk-up version of him smiled and did the same thing. Then he said, "Hiya, y'all!" And I knew that there was someone who was going to be easier for the kids to make fun of than me.
Mr. Lucas.
Most of the kids were just starting. Then Larry Dunn said, "Lord, today, look at that nappy little head. Down home country cornflake the cat done drummed up here from Mississippi, y'all." About a million fingers pointed at the new kids and a million laughed, almost knocked them over. Larry Dunn threw an apple core from his back of the bus, and the new kid got on his hands up just in time to block it from hurting him in the face. Little bits of apple exploded all over the kid, his brother, and me. The other kids went wild, laughing and saying to each other, "Hiya, y'all! Hiya, y'all!" The bus driver jumped up out of his seat and stood between the new kid and Larry Dunn. You see how you kids is. This boy shows some manners and some respect, and y'all want to attack him. That's why nan one of y'all's ever gonna be nothing." The bus driver was really mad. "Larry Dunn, you better sit your behind down and cut this mess out. I know you don't want to start punning on folks, do you? Not with what I know about your mama." Someone said, "Ooh," and Larry Dunn sat down. The bus was real quiet. We'd never seen the driver get this mad before. He pushed the two new kids into the same seat as me and told them, "Don't you pay no mind to them little folks. They ain't happy unless they dragging somebody else down." Then he just had to add, "Y'all just sit here next to Poindexter. He don't bother no one." I sat there and looked at them sideways. I didn't want to say anything to them, and they didn't say anything to me. But I was kind of surprised that God would send a savior to me in such raggedy place. So, that's the end of this chapter.